Hello and namaste to all of you. Today, in our Sustainable Development Goal 2030, we are doing Unit 2.3 Man-Made Disasters. This audio is very useful for the school-going students who are in classes 6 to 12th. The teacher can use it in arrangement period. That's why the name of this series is Arrangement Period for Schools, audio number 28, Sustainable Development Goal 2030. The general instruction for students are the same, that they have to listen the audio very carefully and note down 10 words from this audio by listening in this arrangement period, which is of 40 minutes. Unit 2.3 Man-Made Disasters. In this audio, we will discuss introduction, aims and objectives, man-made disasters, that is consequences of man-made disasters, toxic wastes, that is disposal of toxic wastes, wars and population displacement, that is direct and indirect war time impacts, and at the last we will do nuclear weapons, that is limiting the effects. Point 1, Introduction, aims and objectives. In this audio we have studied In previous audio we have studied the environmental calamities caused by natural disasters like earthquakes, floods, droughts, cyclones, etc., bringing miseries to life and havoc to properties. In the present audio, we will particularly pay attention to man-made disasters. Man-made disasters are major causes of premature death, impaired health status, and diminished quality of life. A disaster can be defined as an occurrence that causes damage, ecological disruption, loss of human life, or deterioration of health on a large scale sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from outside the affected community or area. A hazard is any phenomenon that has the potential to cause a disaster or cause disruption or damage to people and environment. There are many types of disasters beyond those that are usually considered natural. These are termed as human-induced or man-made disasters, which can be defined as the relatively sudden and widespread disturbance of the social system and life of a community by some agent or event over which those involved have little or no control. The relative number of injuries and deaths differ depending on a number of factors such as type of disaster, the density and distribution of population, condition of environment, degree of preparedness, and the opportunity of warning. Aims and objectives. After studying this audio, we will learn point 1, distinguish between natural calamities and man-made disasters. 2, give some example of man-made disasters and list some preventive measures. And point 3, explain the impact of man-made disasters on public health. Point 2, man-made disasters. Man-made disasters may be classified into 3 types. 1, sudden disasters. 2, insidious and continuing disasters. 3, war and civil conflicts. Sudden disasters are those in which human factors are responsible rather than natural factors. The release of methyl isocyanate at the pesticide plant in Bhopal, India in 1984 and the leakage of radioactive substances following the explosion at the Chernobyl, Chernobyl nuclear plant reactor in the Soviet Union in 1986 are a couple of examples of sudden disasters. Sudden disasters that are considered natural may often be caused by preceding human activities, mining catastrophes, earthquakes, sudden floods, and landslides may be the result of indiscriminate deforestation or of construction of dams or by seemingly unrelated human activity. Of late, landslides have been occurring at frequent intervals in the hilly terrains of India, especially in the Uttaranchal region. The effects of landslides, both natural and man-made, are devastating. The road widening activities have greatly damaged the fragile environment of the region, thereby disrupting the human settlements apart from causing enormous damage to transport and communication networks. Development and installation of appropriate precautionary systems will enable in reducing the risks against the landslide hazards. Insidious and continuing disasters include examples like the leakage of toxic chemicals from a dump site at Love Canal in Buffalo, the the tainting of the soil in Times Beach with dioxin oils sprayed on the roads and leakage of radioactive materials dumped at wastage dumps at nuclear weapons production facilities. Some natural phenomena like prolonged drought may be examples of continuing disasters. Disasters like global warming or the greenhouse effect caused by heat trapping gases in the atmosphere released by burning of fossil fuels, use of chlorofluorohydrocarbons in in, aeros, in, in aerosolized perfumes and acid precipitation also come under the disasters under this category. Since World War II, there have been about 127 wars and civil conflicts resulting in 21.8 million deaths involving more than 50% of civilians. The proportion of civil casualties has been increasing in the wide-ranging air strikes and modern warfare tactics, putting entire populations at risk, disrupting food production, imperiling, imperiling fragile ecosystem, and forcing native populations flee from their natural habitats have been the results of war and civil conflicts. Consequences of man-made disasters. Man-made disasters can cause short-term morbidity, mortality, and damage the quality of life and cause premature deaths. The causes of short-term morbidity result in injuries, emotional stress, epidemics, and increase in indigenous diseases. One glaring example is that of forest fires. Every year, millions of tons of forest all around the world are being destroyed and many animals and plant species are disappearing due to deforestation and fires, both a result of human activity. Drastic reduction in forests has significant effects on the delicate global ecosystem. The public health response to man-made disasters is the primary prevention, that is, the prevention of the occurrence of the disaster. Tighter safety regulations of chemical production facilities of hazardous substance would reduce the hazards substantially. Locating these facilities away from populated areas and human habitats would reduce the loss of human life and property. Built-in mechanisms to counter human errors, ensuring safety regulations with quality inputs in engineering and technological safety measures as well as early warning system should result in reducing these disasters if not completely eliminate them. The following diagram gives a general spectrum of environmental calamities and man-made disasters. The degree of human responsibility for a calamity disaster increases from geophysical calamities to society-induced disasters like smoking. It may be inferred that except natural disasters, all other disasters can be prevented. It has been estimated that the number of man-made disasters are more in developing countries in Asia and Africa than in developed countries in Europe and America. One of the causes for man-made disasters is the emergence of free market economies in which economic factors play a central role in decision making in the production, use of resources, and treatment of wastes. Short time horizon over which decisions are taken for profit maximization at the cost of safety standards. From natural to voluntary, from natural to man-made, for intense to diffuse, involuntary, involuntary, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, cyclones, tornadoes, floods, droughts, bushfires, accidents, industrial accidents, air, water, soil pollution, nuclear accident, civil risk, wars, adulteration, smoking. These are from natural to man-made, from natural to voluntary, from intense to diffuse. Point 3. Toxic waves. The peculiar nature of human beings is that the, the, the peculiar nature of human beings is that they change their environment to suit their biological and social needs. In this transaction, they utilize the material necessities, resources, and produce worthless and sometimes harmful byproducts. These byproducts are termed as wastes and may be in the form of gases, liquids, or solids. Direct or indirect exposure to toxic wastes and hazardous chemical agents has been implicated in numerous adverse effects on humans from cancer to birth defects. The old pollutants like lead, mercury, industrial solvents, and pesticide residues are of great concern in many parts of the world. There is a reasonable level of understanding of their effects on human health, although protective measures are not always adequately implemented. There are provisions to reduce their harmful effects on human health and environment, but each day, never and never industrial toxics are found in several household products, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals. There is far less knowledge about the long-term tox- toxicological effects on human health and environment. It has become a common occurrence of accidents in the transportation of industrial and hazardous waste products and inadequate management of disposal of these wastes. So important was the problem of avoiding dumping hazardous wastes in the backyards of poor countries that two important conventions have been concluded wherein the signatories to these conventions have committed themselves to avoid transportation of hazardous wastes. These conventions are number first, Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Wastes and Their Disposal 1989, and number 2, Bamako Convention on the Ban of the Import into Africa and the Control of Transboundary Movement and Management of Hazardous Wastes within Africa 1991. India, a dumping ground for toxic wastes. India is increasingly becoming a dumping ground for toxic industrial wastes from developed countries, which can pose serious threats to public health and the environment, while the developed countries ban the use of hazardous substances and even the processes that generate them. The governments of developing nations like India seem to think that they need every dollar and every job that the processing of such substances creates. Thus, brain damaging mercury and toxic electronic and plastic wastes from the United States, cancer causing asbestos from Canada, defective steel and in tin plates from the European Union, Australia and US, toxic waste oil from the United Arab Emirates, Iran and Kuwait, toxic zinc ash residues and skimmings, lead waste and scrap, used batteries and waste and scrap of metals such as cadmium, chromium, cobalt, antimony, hafnium, and thallium from Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, United Kingdom, Belgium, and Norway are all dumped on India. Hazardous substances are those that are ignitable, corrosive, reactive, or toxic. According to studies, including those by environmental activist groups such as Greenpeace and Toxic Link, every year over 100,000 tons of hazardous wastes enter India in gross violation of the 1997 Supreme Court order banning such import. Lately, the developed countries have gone another step forward by shifting production processes that generate hazardous wastes to developing countries, with 101 countries prohibiting waste imports, up from 3 in 1989. South Asian countries, particularly India, with their lax laws and regulations, are becoming the preferred dumping ground for hazardous wastes. It is not as if there are no laws or international instruments to regulate trade in hazardous wastes. In India, there are the Hazardous Waste Act 1989 and the May 1997 Supreme Court ruling banning the import of hazardous wastes, followed by the orders of February 1998 disallowing auction of hazardous waste stocks in ports and container depots. But these legal instruments were never practiced. The solution lies in making industries accountable, maintaining precautionary principle, refusing waste from other countries, and strengthening local initiatives. Point 3.1, Disposal of toxic wastes. The output of hazardous wastes worldwide was about 400 million tons in 1990s, of which 300 million tons were produced by the OECD countries. These wastes are derived mainly from chemical industries, energy production industries, pulp and paper producing factories, mining industries, and leather tanning processes. Though tighter regulatory controls are enforced on these industries in developed countries, resulting in an increased cost of waste treatment and disposal. The developing countries and countries with no stringent control measures have become a haven to shift the production operations from developed countries to the developing countries. Officially, less than 100 tons of wastes a year are traded to developing countries, but illegal and unofficial trade is much more and is of serious proportions. The illegal traffic in hazardous wastes poses a serious threat to environment and human health in the developing countries. One way of combating such illegal trade is through a system called prior informed consent (PIC) for certain hazardous substances in international trade operated by FAO and even EP. PIC is a procedure that helps the participating countries learn more about the characteristics of potentially hazardous chemicals that may be supplied to them. This in turn generates the necessary public opinion world over to put pressure on the governments to act in a responsible way. The procedure would also help the dissemination of information to other countries and promotes a shared responsibility. Though all wastes are disposed of into the environment, some wastes enter the environment in a controlled manner than others. Some wastes are treated before disposal and others are disposed directly from the source. Wastes produced from the combustion of fuel by motor vehicles are emitted directly into atmosphere and sewage wastes are disposed into rivers and oceans. Since air, rivers and oceans are global commons, this common ownership has facilitated unregulated disposal of wastes. One of the consequences of technological revolution in agricultural production processes has been the release of refuse and residual chemicals into the environment. Chemical fertilizers, hybrid feeds for poultry, slaughterhouse wastes, salt and silt drained from, from irrigated lands as sediments have been causing irreparable damage to the fertile lands. Several disposal techniques had been in vogue to manage the hazardous wastes, the most popular being land fills and underground deposits. A case in point was the disposal of water waste contaminated in the production of chemical warfare agents like mustard gas, white phosphorus, and napalm outside Denver, Colorado during 1960s. The geology of the area beneath the site fractured Precambrian gneiss looked suitable to dig a disposal well over 3,500 meter deep to deposit the liquid waste. Soon after, a series of minor earthquakes were detected in the area which had no known history of seismic activity or instability. Between March 1962 and November 1965, over 700 minor earthquakes were monitored in the area. The geologists established direct link to the underground disposal of liquid wastes and the occurrence of earthquakes, resulting in the stoppage of this method in 1996. There is no doubt that the best way to manage the waste is to prevent it at the source wherever possible. The argument that prevention is better than cure is put by the even EP's Industry and Environment Program Activity Center. When end of pipe pollution controls are added to industrial systems, less immediate damage occurs. But these solutions come to increasing monetary costs to both society and industry and have not been proven to be optimal from the environmental aspect. End of pipe controls are also reactive and selective. Cleaner production, on the other hand, is a comprehensive, preventable approach to environmental protection. Even EPIE PAC 1993. Cleaner production is achieved by examining all phases of a product's life cycle from raw material extraction to its ultimate disposal and reducing the wastage at any particular phase. Thus, cleaner production shall encompass 1. Conservation of energy and raw materials. 2. Reduction in the use of toxic substances. 3. Reduction in the quantity and toxicity of wastes. 4. Extension of product durability. These measures combined with equalization, neutralization, physical, chemical and biological treatments of toxic wastes would reduce their adverse effects in their disposal into the environment. Point 4. Wars and population displacement. Aggression appears to be a fundamental characteristic of human race, and violence has been used to resolve disputes since prehistoric times. If a war is defined as a conflict resulting in 1,000 or more deaths, there have been 471 wars since 1700, resulting in 100 million fatalities. More than 90% of the war deaths in these 3 centuries have occurred in the 20th century alone. Since the end of the Second World War, more than 130 wars and violent internal conflicts have raged in more than 80 countries, most of these being in the developing world. Arms imported by developing countries, half of which are financed by export credits, resulted in 30% debt burden on these countries. The scale of military spending and trade-offs with social and environmental priorities, as quoted by Tolba 1992, are point 1. Even EP spent US $450 million in the decade 1980 to 90 and is less than 5 years worth of global military spending of a few nations. 2. One one Apache helicopter costs US $12 million, a sum that could pay for installing 80,000 hand pumps to give the third world access to safe water. 3. One-day expenditure on the 1991 war over Kuwait could have funded a 5-year global child immunization program against 6 deadly diseases, saving 1 million children a year. War is no more confined to war zones only, or those fighting the war directly. In recent times, there have been more civilian deaths than military deaths, and hundreds and thousands of people are being displaced as refugees. A high percentage of those dying or affected in these conflicts are children. Air power and wide-ranging nature of modern war put entire population at risk, disrupting food production, imperiling fragile ecosystems, and focusing entire populations flee from their natural habitats. The geography of warfare was also changed radically. In recent times, most of the wars are fought in developing countries with indirect and covert involvement of major powers. During the past 5 decades, civil wars representing power conflicts within nations have increased sharply, though these are termed as civil conflicts or civil disturbances. Powerful weaponry with tacit support of global industrial nations is being used, resulting in high casualties and public health risks. 4.1 Direct and indirect wartime impacts. The relationship between people and their environment can be changed significantly during wartime. Priorities priorities are altered. Certain resources are used more rapidly to fuel the war effort. In the time of Henry VIII, for example, many of England's oak trees were cut down to build warships. During prolonged trench warfare in the coastal plains of France and Belgium, most of the forests were destroyed, resulting in the destruction of agricultural land and woodland. Kuwait Bay, a soup for disaster. Kuwait Bay, a soup for disaster. Increases in nutrient concentrations in the Gulf have often been concentrated in the Bay, Kuwait Bay and the area around the outfall of the Shat al-Arab River, and they have been cited as the cause of a number of eutrophication incidents. A major red tide and an associated fish kill occurred in 1999. The main conclusion of that incident was that unless pollution levels were reduced drastically, eutrophication conditions would worsen, causing more fish kills. The 1999 event was one of a series. In 1986, tons of fish as well as other marine animals, including 527 dolphins, 7 dugongs, 58 turtles, and more than 10,000 cuttlefish were found dead along the shores of the Gulf. During 1999 and 1991, 137 sea turtles were found dead along the Omani coast. In 1993, a fish kill was observed 2 months after the sinking of a Russian merchant vessel carrying chemicals. Similar phenomena were reported along the along the coasts of Bahrain, Iran, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates between 1993 and 1998. Kuwait Bay has experienced a series of changes over the years, including the release of both treated and untreated sewage and oils and untreated wastes from sources connected directly to the stormwater network, two commercial parks and several marinas, 3 power stations, a commercial fish farm in the middle of the bay, and an artificial river in Iraq into which sewage and agriculture runoff from the newly drained marshes are released. expert pressure on the bay. Another source of nutrients is wind-blown soil carried by the predominant northwesterly winds, which has increased over the past few years due to the shrinking marshlands in Iraq. The linkage between the marshes and the Gulf through the Satel Arab and its tributaries has allowed fish to migrate. In August-September 2001, more than 3,000 tons of fish, predominantly mullet, died, and pathogen identified is Streptococcus Streptococcus inia could have originated from sewage or contaminated fish feed. Thus, the same species was reported in Bahrain in 1999 when there was massive mortality in rabbit fish populations. The combined effects of elimination of the Iraqi marshes as a natural wastewater treatment system and the continued input of organic matter from anthropogenic activities coupled with arid conditions have created a recipe for disaster, transforming the Gulf into a soup ready to provide a perfect media for bacterial and algal blooms. Deliberate destruction and manipulation of environment has been used by armies to gain military advantage. Scorched earth, scorched earth policies in which vegetation and crops are deliberately destroyed to prevent their use by the enemy have been one of the age-old military tactics. In Afghanistan, the deliberate and inadvertent destruction of forest lands reduced the forest cover to alarming proportions in the past 2 decades. Long-lasting adverse environmental effects are attributed to areas where biological weapons are developed and tested. A classic example is the island of Gruinard off the west coast of Scotland, which was the site of experiments with highly contagious anthrax spores during the Second World War. The island remained uninhabited by government decree until 1988, but even now a complete decontamination is difficult to guarantee. The use weapons of mass destruction can lead to indiscriminate killing, maiming, and injuring entire populations, destroying and contaminating ecosystems transcending geographical and natural boundaries. Various medical responses after the use of such weapons in a war could neither restore life to the millions nor restore biotic and abiotic environment. Since the World War II, an estimated $16 trillion has been spent on the production of military hardware. Several industrialized nations spend huge amounts of their resources on arms production. They are the main suppliers of arms to the developing nations, depleting the latter's revenues from spending on areas of health, education, and well-being. Along with the diversion of revenue to military research, arms spending diverts scientists from working to improve health and quality of life. It is an irony that the word expenditure on weapons research far exceeds the combined spending on the development of cleaner energy technologies, improvement of health standards, increased agricultural productivity, and control of hazardous pollutants. Next point, nuclear weapons we will cover in our next audio number 29. Okay, thank you.